Hello, thank you for taking time to watch the 2024-2025 outreach presentation for the Sacramento Valley Water Quality Coalition. By watching this video, you will fulfill your annual outreach requirement as a member of the coalition. We are going to be covering a variety of topics today, beginning with an overview of the coalition. We will review surface water monitoring results from the past year and take a look at the coming year, which is an assessment year. Then we'll move on to talk about member requirements for the coming year so that you have all of the information you need on how to remain compliant with all regulatory requirements. Now, throughout the presentation, several links to separate web pages will be mentioned, and these links will be clickable in the PowerPoint presentation and available below in the video description. At the end, we'll have some information on who to contact if you have questions. The Irrigated Lands Regulatory Program, or ILRP, began in 2003 and operates using waste discharge requirements, which are issued by state and regional water quality control boards. The ILRP is simply one of many permits that the water boards issue to a variety of non-point and point sources. Similar to operations such as stormwater, landfills, food processors, and wastewater treatment plants, for nearly a quarter of a century, there is and has been the requirement to understand how irrigated lands may impact surface and groundwater. Management of the ILRP in the state is divided up into regions. The Sacramento Valley falls into Region 5, which is managed by the Central Valley Regional Water Quality Control Board, or Regional Board. Within Region 5, there are 14 total agricultural coalitions and 9 WDRs. Under the ILRP, all land that is commercial and irrigated requires regulatory coverage by either joining an agricultural coalition or obtaining coverage as an individual. Most growers choose to join a coalition for two main reasons. One is cost. It's less expensive to complete required surface and groundwater monitoring. And number two, anonymity of farm practices. All member reports are aggregated and individual reporting data cannot be tied back to individual growers. The Sac Valley Coalition is the largest agricultural coalition in the state. It is composed of more than 7,300 landowners encompassing over 1.17 million irrigated acres. The coalition is supported by local farm bureaus, resource conservation districts, county agricultural commissioners, and crop specialists with the University of California Cooperative Extension. The mission of the Sac Valley Coalition is to enhance and improve water quality in the Sacramento River Basin while sustaining the economic viability of agriculture, functional values of managed wetlands, and sources of safe drinking water. The coalition is managed by the Northern California Water Association, or NCWA, and is administered by 11 local subwatershed groups. The primary role of the coalition is to assist landowners in the region with compliance with the WDR through the coordination of surface and groundwater monitoring, compiling required reports, and importantly, offering anonymity in the reporting of on-farm practices. And we are very proud to say that since the submittal of the very first monitoring and reporting program for the Valley in 2004 to the 2019 State Water Board Presidential Order, which expanded the program to groundwater and initiated the on-farm drinking water well monitoring program, all the way to today, the Sac Valley Coalition and its 11 subwatershed groups have successfully maintained regulatory compliance for growers in an equitable and cost-effective approach. Now, as we just talked about, while the coalition is heavily involved in helping landowners become and maintain compliance with the Irrigated Lands Regulatory Program, it is important to mention that the coalition is not the regulatory agency. The coalition is simply an option by which landowners can comply with a state-mandated program. The coalition only provides information to the regional board that is required by the WDR. The State Water Board and Regional Board mandates and manages the program respectively, and the coalition is simply the go-between for you, the member, and the regulatory agencies, the water boards. However, The coalition is not the regulator. So one of the primary ways the coalition fulfills its obligations under the WDR is through surface water monitoring. At one point, while the ILRP was first being developed, the regional board was considering edge-of-field monitoring. Essentially, each landowner could have been required to sample any discharge leaving their fields to ensure it met regulatory limits. Instead, the coalition and its members are allowed to operate using representative monitoring sites. At representative monitoring sites, water and sediment samples are taken to represent the entire drainage area. The coalition collects water quality and sediment samples on a 3-year cycle of assessment, core. The 2025 monitoring year, which began on October 1st, 2024 and will end September 30th, 2025, is an assessment year, so a broader suite of analytes will be sampled and analyzed. 12 monthly sampling events will take place across the 11 subwatersheds, with all sites monitored 10 to 11 times during the year. Things like physical and general chemistry, pathogens, nutrients, metals, registered pesticides including pyrethroids, and toxicity in the water column and sediment will be analyzed. No core monitoring will take place in subwatersheds with the reduced monitoring option. The previous monitoring year, which was the 2024 monitoring year, was a core year. Unfortunately, no existing management plans were completed and one new management plan was triggered. In last year's presentation, we had reported that the coalition successfully avoided a management plan in the Sacramento Amador subwatershed for nitrate plus nitrite as nitrogen, because it was found that the triggering exceedance was caused by an unenrolled grower. Unfortunately, after many discussions and despite our very strong disagreement with the decision, the regional board notified the coalition in July of 2024 that we would need to develop a management plan after all. So that is one management plan in the Sacramento Amador subwatershed for nitrate plus nitrite as nitrogen. A management plan in the Colusa Glen subwatershed was also triggered for pyrethroids. Directing your attention to the table, which shows an overview of monitoring results from the past year, you can see that only exceedances of pyrethroids and High-Lila toxicity in the water column were observed. Pyrethroids continue to be detected and exceed limits over 40% of the time. The 2024 results bring overall exceedant rates for pyrethroids evaluated from January 2018 to September 2024 to levels greater than 10% in most valley floor subwatersheds. Exceedances at the Pine Creek site in Butte-Yuba Sutter are at 54.5%. The 6 pyrethroid pesticides that are monitored for can be seen here on the right. They are cypermethrin, lambda-cyhalothrin, bifenthrin, S-fenvalerate, permethrin, and cyfluthrin. Now I know that we must sound like a broken record when it comes to pyrethroid pesticides, but unfortunately, as you see in our monitoring results, we continue to see exceedances, and we must continue to provide outreach and resources. Pyrethroids are highly toxic at low concentrations to invertebrates eaten by waterfowl and fish. ILRP trigger limits are very, very low for pyrethroids. Pyrethroids have both chronic and acute ILRP trigger limits, and they are compared to the same unitless value of 1. In terms of toxicity, some pyrethroids are more toxic than others, with bifenthrin being the most toxic and permethrin being the least toxic. But despite this rating, growers should be extremely cautious when applying any pyrethroid pesticide. Pyrethroids bind tightly to organic matter and soil particles, So among other BMPs, growers should pay special attention to reducing drift and sediment runoff. A stewardship approach is the best approach. For more information on pyrethroids and BMPs related to them, please refer to the resource links shown here. These links can also be found in the video description. As of October 2024, the Coalition has 5 management plans for and related to pyrethroid pesticides. 1 in the Solano subwatershed, 3 in the BYS subwatershed, and 1 in the Colusa Glen subwatershed. There's also the nitrate plus nitrite as nitrogen management plan in the Sacramento Amador subwatershed that we previously discussed. As a reminder, a management plan is triggered when there are 2 or more exceedances of the same constituent at the same site within a 3-year period, and they can only be completed through a combination of monitoring results and management practice documentation after a minimum of 3 years have passed without any additional exceedances. This means that each time another exceedance is observed at a site, the management plan is pushed out for another 3 years at least. So what do these management plans mean practically to you as a member? Well, each management plan triggers the requirement for more surface water monitoring and more member reporting in that drainage and in that subwatershed, which in turn triggers increased consultant and staff time in that drainage and in that subwatershed. All that equates to increased costs in that drainage and in that subwatershed. So looking ahead to the rest of the 2025 monitoring year, which did already begin on October 1st, here are the main things that we would like you members to take away. The best way to keep costs down is to avoid triggering exceedances and management plans and to complete existing management plans as soon as possible. To do that, please always exercise extreme caution when applying all pesticides, but especially pyrethroids. Okay, we are now going to move on to talk about requirements Coalition members should keep in mind for this coming year. Member requirements for the 2025 reporting season are quite similar to requirements of previous years. The Irrigation and Nitrogen Management Plan worksheet must be completed by March 1st. This worksheet will stay on farm and is not turned into the Coalition. If your property is in an area that is high vulnerability for nitrogen or you have a field identified as an outlier, you are required to certify your worksheet. We'll talk about certification options in a few minutes. Now, although completion of the worksheet is not necessarily being tracked at the Coalition level, if your property is selected for an on-farm inspection by the regional board, you will be required to produce this document for at least the 3 to 5 previous crop years. The Irrigation and Nitrogen Management Plan Summary Report does need to be turned into the Coalition, and some subwatersheds have an online tool to complete this report. In the Summary Report, you will report your actuals from the previous crop year, including actual nitrogen applied and yields. So for the 2025 reporting season, you will be reporting on the 2024 crop year. Members in the Valley floor are also required to complete a Groundwater Quality Management Practice Implementation Report, or MPIR. This can be completed online. And members in a drainage with an active Surface Water Quality Management Plan are required to complete a Surface Water MPIR. Areas identified as high vulnerability for sediment erosion must complete a sediment erosion control plan, but this plan only needs to be completed and certified once. We'll discuss options for certification of the SECP in a few minutes. And of course, there is the annual outreach participation, which you are completing by watching this video. I would like to emphasize at this point that because you are a member of the Coalition, nitrogen use, yields, and other on-farm practices collected through these reports remain anonymous and cannot be traced back to a specific grower. The coalition is here to help you keep track of what is required to be completed and when. We'll notify you of everything that is needed for compliance, but please remember that the ultimate responsibility for completing all of these requirements is up to each individual grower. Information collected through these reports have been instrumental in streamlining some ILRP requirements and demonstrating that drinking water limits are already being met in the groundwater. One of the ways this has been done is through the calculation of groundwater protection values at the township scale. The information is also the basis for continuing to right-size the program in the Sacramento Valley that began in 2009 with the reduced monitoring management practice alternative for upper watershed agricultural areas. Members who fail to complete their reporting on time will have their names submitted to the regional board as required by the WDR. At this point, the regional board, as the regulatory agency, will follow up with members to get those late reports in the form of phone calls and letters. The coalition will continue to assist members in completing the reports even after the deadline passes. However, it should be mentioned that there may be late fees to account for the additional staff time required to help with late reporters. The regional board performs what is called progressive enforcement. Displayed here is the enforcement pyramid used for late reporters. Between each level is a waiting period in which members are given an opportunity to respond. If a member does not respond, they move on up to the next level of enforcement. Now, the goal of these efforts is not to frighten landowners or collect the fines necessarily, but it is to get the landowners compliant and receive the data. That being said, there are consequences if a member fails to respond and submit the late report, including fines up to $1,000 per day. Similar processes are used for members who fail to pay their dues and non-enrolled landowners. If you are ever a recipient of one of these types of letters, please respond immediately to avoid being escalated to the next level. However, if you are a member, the best way to avoid enforcement from the regional board is simply to complete your reporting on time and pay your dues. Okay, as you recall, the INMP worksheet and SECP require certification if you're in an area determined to be high risk for nitrogen or sediment erosion. One option to certify these reports is to become self-certified. The INMP Grower Self-Certification class is available online at any time. After taking the course and passing an open book online exam, growers become eligible to self-certify their INMP worksheet. If you use a CCA, they may also be able to certify your worksheet as long as they have completed the CCA Nitrogen Certification course. The SECP self-certification training course will be available during the month of February. The training also requires passing an open book online exam. To access the trainings, please visit the link on the page. If you'd like to certify your reports in a different way, please reach out to your watershed for options. To remain a member in good standing, you must also pay your annual fees and dues on time, or you risk being dropped in enforcement from the regional board. Fees are determined by each watershed and depend on factors such as size, number of monitoring sites, and existence of any management plans. The fees cover, among other things, the State Water Quality Oversight Fee, which is evaluated on a per acre basis. For 2024, the fee is $1.21 for irrigated pasture with no external nitrogen inputs, and $1.49 per irrigated acre for all other crops. Fees also cover programmatic costs such as surface water monitoring and local costs such as membership support. 2025 will be year 4 of the on-farm drinking water well monitoring program in the Sacramento Valley. Under this requirement, members must sample all wells on enrolled parcels that are actively used for drinking or cooking for nitrate plus nitrite as nitrogen. An ELAP certified lab must be used for analysis. You must sample annually before January 1st each year until your results meet one of the sampling requirements listed here on the right side of the slide. If you have other questions regarding this requirement, we ask that you please contact the Central Valley Regional Water Quality Control Board, whose information is listed in yellow at the bottom of this slide. And as we wrap up this presentation, I would like to emphasize once again that the Coalition is not the regulatory agency. We are one option to help you comply with the state-mandated Irrigated Lands Regulatory Program. We are the go-between between you, the landowner and member, and the regulatory agencies, the water boards. With that, we have come to the end of the 2024-2025 outreach video. Listed here are some resources for you if you have any more questions about what we discussed today. As always, you can contact your local subwatershed or Bruce Houdesheldt, Director of Water Quality, if you require any more information or clarification. Thank you very much for watching, and we hope that you have a great rest of your day.